really. That's quite light. So, but I'm just going to use this limited palette again. It's yellow ochre, vermilion, burnt umber, which I didn't use the raw umber with the Rubens, but yeah, burnt umber, raw umber, and black. So we'll just sort of feel our way through it. It's looking quite pink actually. So I've got some medium, and I've oiled out the surface. So I don't know if you can see that. It's quite warm, and I think yeah, the general impression I got, it's probably going to appear lighter than the original. Just because actually that image, I remember seeing it in the National Gallery in London, but you know, if you're in you know, in real life, yeah, the painting might appear quite bright, but the image, I'm not sure if it's quite sort of muted, quite it's quite dark. But I'm sure this is how he approached it. Looking at his paintings closely, you can just see that he's literally it just sits on the surface really. It's just whatever colour he's mixed, he's just gone over it. We might do it a couple of times, there might be a couple of glazes. But you know, he's just adding it. It just can't be too wet. I've made it a bit wet there, there's been a bit too much medium. So I'm just going to mix up some more, which is drier. So that's just got a lot of white in. You can see there's sort of, he's got quite flushed cheeks. Sort of here, it's definitely redder, pinker. Certainly that's very bright. I'm not going to change my sort of typical brush stroke, which is you know, slightly longer. I'm not doing you know, the sort of fine dashes of paint. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. We just got to keep it thin so we can see the underpainting. I feel like that's quite good, maybe. Very thin, so there's not, I haven't put any more paint on the brush, I'm just going over it very lightly, a very light touch, just to sort of hold on to the underpainting. And as I always say, you know, it's the opportunity for adjusting the glazing, adjusting the drawing. So you can see there, I'm still drawing in the line of the eyebrow. And I'm going to have to go over, just slightly over the edge. And that might happen from the other way, from the darker tones in the hair, the shadows. Just to sort of smooth this transition because it's quite sharp. In an ideal world, I don't want to sort of paint any shadows now. I feel like Caravaggio should have he's sort of done it, and now from what I've seen of his paintings, it's just the addition of this colour. I'm just going to see if it's possible, and I reckon I can get close to it, mainly from everything I learned with the Rubens. But you know, we'll keep going. If we can't we'll be able to get closer next time. We'll see what lessons we can learn in this go. So I mean, this works. So suddenly it's quite a bit chalky there. So the colours are quite rich. that he's putting on, but very, very, very delicately. I'm using, just because I like to, I'm using a hog's hair, but you don't have to. I just lost the drawing ever so slightly here. There's just this muscle as he's frowning. So I'll just get another brush with some darker colour. I think the key, actually, well, what I've just noticed is, so if you're painting over shadows, you can't use too much white because it's just going to appear chalky. So that's just pure vermilion and yellow ochre. I'm not saying it's going to work. It does have white in it. I mean, his ear is very, very red. So I'm just, because I saw somewhere that's similar. That hasn't done it very well. Okay. So I need a small sable just to do that. Just very tentatively working over with this layer of colour. I'm going to do, I've got plans to do Caravaggio's Bacchus, and because I just thought that just looked really lovely, and would be a great example of showing this technique, so I'm looking forward to doing that too, but hopefully this will be a good dry run. I was trying to think which painting I saw of Caravaggio's, but looking closely, it is just application of paint of this kind of consistency over whatever underpainting. So I mean, possibly the only way he was able to do it was with a glaze over the top of it, because it's starting to, it just looks a tiny bit flat. And if I painted a dark glaze over it, I don't know, it's a magical effect. It just immediately throws some of the sort of areas of half shadow, you know, like in the forehead. It just it could just cast that into the background very, very, just beautifully, so simply. Just a very, very thin coat, you know, of it would be raw umber, burnt umber, or a bit of both and a bit of black. Just feel, or maybe Maybe it was the darkness of the underpainting, who knows. It's quite pinky. What I might do is just pause and just get really close and do this line of his eyelid. That might be a way of doing it so that I can keep filming. And then, actually, it's just pure vermilion I'm using just for his ear. While we're doing some vermilion, let's go through what are the other areas that can do with that, and definitely the lips. The lips I felt need a bit more drawing. So just over just along the top. So this is it's quite a small portrait, so there's less room for manoeuvre. So it's kind of easier to do if you're doing it without being filmed, maybe. You know, I thought it would be a good idea to do it, you know, slightly smaller. Less to do really, but it's a bit more finicky. Just taking some of the paint off. It's actually a lot darker. And one thing that I thought might be a challenge is, you know, how to just work into these areas of shadow. Oh dear. Oh, I need a bit of cloth. So just put a bit of medium on a bit of cloth to get that off. So yeah, it's that sort of that much colour in it. And it's quite a dark colour, but yeah. I think I probably have to put a bit of burnt umber in, but let's just try and hold off just for a second. With the Rubens, it did really help going over with the second glaze. I might, at this stage, I might just have to accept that that's what I need to do. I'm just softening this transition just with some it's quite a lot of colour. And I'm actually going over some of the shadow that I've already painted. I feel like that works. Because that's just the lovely thing about glazing, just if there is sort of imperfection, or if there's a sort of unsightly brush marks, things like that, it just works wonders where, you know, just being able to sort of just scumble or glaze regardless, it can just clean up areas. That seems to be, that's quite good, because that was one of my dilemmas, you know, how to do it. I've done it with a little bit of burnt umber. You've got the imprimatura, which was too light, so I've darkened it, and then I've modelled it a little bit with the burnt umber, but then just with this, it's quite a rich colour here, so it's just vermilion and yellow ochre, but just very lightly going over that, just to give it just a little bit of colour. That's quite good, really. Maybe that's what he did. And yeah, I had actually used some white around here, because you can see that just in the cheek that's in shadow, it's differentiated. It's not just a flat shadow, and he's modelled it somehow, and I think that's it, maybe. In this part of the chin, there are actually two levels of shadow. There's much darker just around in here, just by his shoulder, and then it just lightens on with his chin. There's this.